What's up, college football fans? Can you believe it's already week 6? Boy, time flies. So, today we're going to talk about the current top 25 AP coaches poll, and I'm going to preview the games for week 6. So, let's get this started. All right, folks. Make sure everything's good here as always. There we go. There's the AP and coaches top 25 polls. So, let's see what we got here. Talk a little bit about the games. Okay, so number one in the AP poll is Alabama. Number one in the coaches poll is Texas. So they're in reverse order. Number one in the AP is Bama. Number two in the AP is Texas. And in the coaches poll, Texas is number one and Bama is number two. Of course, Bama got the huge win last week at home against the Georgia Bulldogs. They've owned that series other than the national championship game. That was a tale of two halves. That was a great football game. In that game, Bama got off to such a fast start, 28-0. Georgia did such an amazing job coming back, taking the lead back. Milrose, the big throws. Man, Alabama found a way to win this game. 3 interceptions in the first half by Georgia was a backbreaker. Can't turn the ball over like that and win a big game. Put themselves in too big a hole. Bulldogs could have won that game, but I mean, right now, as you can see, those are two teams we're both expecting to, without a doubt, be in the college football playoff. Texas, on the other hand, they haven't really been uberly tested yet up to this point. Arch Manning getting to play right now. As Quinn Ewers is hurt, but it's the perfect time to play him. You go through a little weaker patch in your schedule, play your backup, get him out there. Arch looks good running the ball. I mean, hell, he doesn't look like a man in the way he moves. That guy can move. I don't think he's ready to take over the job yet. Obviously, from Quinn Ewers, even though people are trying to push him to that point, Ewers certainly has the job back. He should, at least when he comes back. Man was a legitimate Heisman candidate before he got hurt, and he's going to be a high draft pick. Number 3, you look at the Ohio State Buckeyes. Another team, they haven't really been tested a whole lot lately, but they're 4-0. They're very talented under Coach Ryan Day. And can't wait to see them get tested, and they will be tested in that Big Ten. I might have to look later at their upcoming schedule and see some of the teams they got coming up. So I'm going to peek ahead, not just past this Saturday, but I'll peek ahead a little further on certain team schedules after I get through this poll, of course. Tennessee's number 4 in both polls. They've been pretty dominant as well this season. Can't wait for them their schedule to toughen up. Georgia dropped down to 5 in both polls, which is down 4 spots from 1 in the coaches and down 3 spots from 2 in the AP poll. The Oregon Ducks come in at number 6, moving up 2 spots in the AP and 1 in the coaches poll. They've not been overly dominant this year. They didn't look great against UCLA most of the game. Penn State's coming in at number 7 in both polls. They got a nice win this week in a battle of undefeateds against a good Illinois team. Number 8's Miami Hurricanes, down 1 spot in one and up 1 in the other. Canes did not look great. They've looked good this year against weaker competition. Cam Ward's been outstanding this year, but talk about survival. That Virginia Tech game was the ultimate survival for the Miami Hurricanes, but nevertheless, 5-0 start is probably the best start they've been off to in years, at least that I can remember. I'd have to go back and do a little research on that. But, yeah, they're off to a great start, hoping to keep it going. The ACC is not the strongest conference. But we saw what happened at home against Virginia Tech, so it's any given week. And in the past, we've seen them drop games to all types of teams in that ACC, Dukes and whoever, North Carolina, Virginia. Number 9 is going to be Missouri in both polls. Missouri's looked great except for that one game when they sort of fell asleep against Vanderbilt. They're up 2 spots in both polls. Number 10 is Michigan, up 2 spots also. They've not been all that impressive. They got their big win this season last week, of course. But when you look at this Michigan team, that was against USC, by the way. I almost forgot who they beat. We'll get to them in the very next spot at number 11 in the AP and 15 in the coaches. But Michigan has struggled, man. They've not looked great. That USC win is the one thing that's carrying weight that has them as a top 10 team in both polls. Then you got, I mentioned USC 11 in the AP and all the way at 15 in the coaches. That's a dramatic difference between 11 and 15. Not sure about that. Miller Moss, really good quarterback. They got some good receivers as well. They lost to Michigan, a game I didn't think they would lose because Michigan's been ho-hum. Number 12 is Ole Miss. Ole Miss in 12 and in 11. Ole Miss just dropped down 6 spots in both polls. Suffered a bad loss this week at home to Kentucky. Kentucky almost beat Georgia, so maybe they're a little better than we think. But for the Rebels, it's a game you can't lose at home. You got to find a way to grit that one out, and they didn't. Number 13 is the Bayou Bengals from LSU, and they're number 12 in the coaches poll. I think they look their best part this season in the game. South Alabama, they may not be a great team led by Major Applewhite, the former Catholic High quarterback from Baton Rouge, by the way, South Alabama. But LSU defense held an offense that's been explosive, not against the best competition, but has been explosive down to 10 points. There's some promising good things that came out of that game if you're an LSU fan. Number 14 is Notre Dame and 13 in the coaches poll. They're sort of a little up and down as well. Number 15 is Clemson and 14 in the coaches poll. And Dabo's had that team playing well ever since they got humiliated week 1 against Georgia. Cade Klubnik's been playing his best ball the past 3 weeks. He's a guy I've had so many questions about. Didn't think he was very good, but he's looking like his spot where he was recruited at the past 3 weeks. He's looked good. And if they keep climbing, that's a team that can win that ACC. Number 16 is Iowa State in both polls. They're 4-0. Haven't really been tested much yet, but they will be. So we'll see how that works out later on. Their best win was against Iowa. Iowa's a good football team. It's a big rivalry. The Cy Hawk Trophy. Give them props for that. BYU coming in at 17 and then 19 in the coaches poll. 5-0 on the season. Brigham Young looks good. We'll see if they can keep that thing rolling. Number 18 is Utah Utes, who lost their first game this week, dropping down 8 spots from 10 to 18 in both polls. Big loss for them, but they're in a Big 12 conference that I feel is wide open. So they've lost, but they're definitely not done as far as being able to move up and get into that playoff. Oklahoma's coming in at number 19, up 2 spots in one poll, and number 17, up 1 spot in the coaches poll. Oklahoma's one loss was to Tennessee. They played fairly tough. Tennessee is just a better football team. Oklahoma had to come back and beat an Auburn team that hasn't looked very good in the SEC, but a win's a win on the road when you're in the SEC. These road wins are not good. I don't give a damn who you're playing. These road wins are not easy in the SEC. Kansas State's coming in at number 20, up 3 spots in both polls. They're up 5 spots in the AP poll, in the coaches poll, excuse me. They dropped 1 game this year, but they're a good football team. Again, Big 12, wide open. Win a few games, get on a roll. They're very much alive to make the playoffs. Boise State coming in at 21. The Broncos up 4 spots from 25. And they are not in the coaches poll. What the Broncos hope for is to keep rolling and maybe have a loss or 2 from a group of 5 team that's up above them, like a BYU, and maybe sneak into that that playoff as the group of 5 team. Number 22 is Louisville. They are down 7 spots to 22 and down 5 spots in the AP poll to 22. They lost to Notre Dame this week, a good Notre Dame team. It was a pretty competitive game most of the way, but the Irish were a little too strong for Louisville. Indiana comes in at 23, ranked for the first time this year, and 24 in the coaches poll. The Indiana Hoosiers are 5-1 this season, and they look good right now. So for them, got to keep it rolling, got to keep the momentum rolling. They're in a tough conference, 5-0 start. So I'm going to check out some of these team schedules in a few minutes, so we'll kind of forecast what's going to happen to come. Number 24 The Illinois Illini, they dropped their first game this week to Penn State, and they're down 5 spots to 24 and 4 spots to 25 in the coaches poll. 4-1 on the season, and they're a good football team as well. Texas A&M coming in at 25 in the AP, tied with UNLV, who was unranked, and the Rebels are 23 in the coaches poll, and A&M's 21 in the coaches poll. A&M, not a whole lot to say about them. They're going to go to the SEC games. They're going to play a lot of tough teams. They've been sort of ho-hum, one loss on the season. UNLV, had the controversial situation with their quarterback opting out after the great start, and apparently they didn't give him the NIL money that they promised him, and obviously that's a tough situation. I don't really want to get into the NIL stuff too much, but UNLV, they're undefeated right there in the polls. Some of the teams I look at receiving votes on the outside, I like that Pittsburgh team right outside of both polls. Eli Holstein, this guy's from Zachary High, local school here. He was fantastic in high school. I've seen him play many times. He's thrown for over 300 yards, I believe, in every game this year. Guys playing really well. James Madison's an interesting team. They put 70 on North Carolina. So there's some interesting teams right outside of the poll. Be interesting to see what those teams do and when or if they step into the poll. So now I want to look at some matchups for this upcoming week. So this is not a big top 25 week for matchups. We'll start off at the top. Friday night, it's tomorrow night. You got Oregon versus Michigan State. Michigan State 3-2. Oregon 4-0 on the season. They've not been a dominant team. 23.5 points. Don't really know a lot about Michigan State, but I'll tell you, I'll take them because Oregon's not smashing a lot of teams by more than 23.5 this year. UNLV, like I said, minus their quarterback, playing against a Syracuse team that's not bad. UNLV is a 6.5 point favorite there. That's a potential upset alert game also tomorrow night. Saturday morning, UCLA, you talk about early morning, 9 a.m. out on the West Coast. They're going to be traveling to Pennsylvania for now a conference game against Penn State. 9 o'clock in the morning on the West Coast. Their fans got to get up pretty early to see that game. But UCLA, if their fans, I probably would stay asleep because you ain't missing much. That team's not good. 27.5 point underdog to Penn State. Again, that's a lot of points. I would not take a 27.5 point favorite there, but Penn State should mollywop UCLA. Missouri going on the road to Texas A&M. Texas A&M a 2.5 point favorite. That's a big game. I like Missouri in that game, number 9. They looked bad against Vanderbilt at home, but I think they're better than Texas A&M. I think they should beat them at home. SMU 4-1 on the year, visiting Louisville. I think that's another upset alert game. Louisville 7-point favorite at home. I could see him, SMU, pulling off the upset there. I could see it. Iowa, Ohio State. Buckeyes a 20-point favorite. Iowa always plays good defense. They don't score many points. I think they keep their game low scoring and ugly enough that I would not take Ohio State in the 20 points, but I expect Ohio State to win it by probably 2 scores, at least 10 points. Georgia against Auburn. Georgia looking for the bounce back at home against an Auburn team that's not very good. And I think Georgia should spank Auburn pretty good in that game. Ole Miss visiting South Carolina. Not a bad team. The Gamecocks, their one loss was a comeback against LSU, a comeback from LSU. South Carolina at home there. Ole Miss needs a bounce back bad. So I don't know, 9 points on the road. I think that's got potential to be closer than that, but I think Ole Miss should win this game. Indiana in the poll for the first time in a while, going against Northwestern on the road. Indiana's 14-point favorite. I probably would take those 14 points with Northwestern, but Indiana, it's a chance to show that you belong here in this top 25. Get your win, go to 6-0, become bowl eligible early in the season before the gauntlet picks up. Alabama, Vanderbilt. That's a game right there. Vandy looked good against Missouri. They're at home. Alabama could be primed for a letdown. 22.5 points. I'm sure that game will really be an Alabama home game in Nashville because Vanderbilt doesn't have much of a fan base, so I think Alabama wins that game. I would probably swallow the 22.5. I probably would take the 22.5 with Vandy. Clemson versus Florida State. Clemson's looked good the last 3 weeks. Florida State's looked terrible. 14.5 points right there. I think Uwe 4 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, going against his old team. He's got something to prove. He wants to do well in that game. I think Florida State, just a couple of things I can see in this game. I can see Uwe having his best game and, willing that team to be very competitive and have a chance to win that game against Clemson. Or I can see Clemson just going all out and just smashing them. So that one's a hard one for me to pick because I can see that going either way, but I think Clemson wins that game regardless. Boise State, 3-1, they're number 21. Their team, they got 1 loss on the season, but someone from that group of 5 is going to be a playoff team. Boise State would like to be that team. Got to start with a big win against Utah State. They're a 27-point favorite. That's a lot of points. Tennessee is a 13-point favorite at Arkansas. Arkansas has been an up-and-down team the last few years. They know how to step up and surprise people and play well when you don't expect it. They also know how to look like garbage and surprise people in a bad way when you do expect them to play well. So that's a game I can see Tennessee mauling them, and I can also see Arkansas hanging around and making that game really close to the end. But either way, Tennessee should win. Michigan, number 10, is against Washington at home. Washington, of course, were in a national championship game a year ago with Michael Penix Jr. 3-2 this year, unranked. Of course, lost their coach to Alabama. That is actually a rematch of the national championship game. Did not think about that at first. Michigan, of course, won that championship game, and now they're going to Seattle for a conference game. Isn't that the craziest thing? A conference game. Michigan in Seattle against Washington. And 2.5-point favorite is Washington. Michigan's not been all that impressive. Boy, I would not put money on this game. I think it's a coin flip type game. For the purpose of this video, I got to pick someone. I'm going to pick Michigan to win close. USC's got Minnesota, another conference game, an odd one, in Huntington Bank Stadium in Minnesota. USC, an 8-point favorite, traveling to the Midwest. 2-3 team, 0-2 in the Big Ten is Minnesota. That's a game USC should take. They should cover that 8 points. They're just more talented and better. Iowa State's a 12-point favorite over Baylor. Coach Miranda, he might be on the edge of his rope. 2-3 season, 0-2 in the Big 12. Iowa State, they got playoff aspiration. They need to win this game. They're a 12-point favorite. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt and say that they mollywop Baylor. Last game, 9:30 Central, 10:30 Eastern. The Miami Hurricane, from as far east as you can go on the Atlantic Ocean, playing a conference game, an Atlantic Coast Conference game in Berkeley, California. It's ACC after dark against Cal. I mean, it's crazy, isn't it? Isn't it the craziest thing? Cal playing in the ACC and Miami going all the way across the country for a conference game at 10:30 at night Eastern. Cam Ward has been great. He threw a bad interception last week. Miami almost blew a game at home against a Virginia Tech team that's not very good. Cal's 3-1. Their 1 loss is to a terrible Florida State team. Miami's a 10-point favorite here. I think, well, I want to say I think Cal keeps this thing closer than 10, but maybe Miami looks at last week as a wake-up call and decides to go out and destroy Cal. But either way, got to go Canes here. So that's my picks for this week. I'm going to peek ahead a little bit for matchups. Just kind of peek ahead. Week 7, big matchup that week, and we'll talk about these matchups next week. But week 7 has Ohio State and Oregon. Huge Big 12 matchup. At the moment, number 3 versus number 6. We'll see how these teams do. Ohio State's off this week. Oregon plays, I believe. That's huge. In Eugene, Oregon. Big 12 matchup. How about another big Big 12 matchup? Number 7, Penn State. Number 11, USC. Number 2 SEC matchup, Texas. In the Red River rivalry against number 19, Oklahoma. Expect Quinn Ewers back for that game. That's going to be huge. Number 12, Ole Miss that week. This is next week, so y'all know not this week. Coming up, Ole Miss going down to Baton Rouge, going off a Nicholson Drive to take on the Tigers. Number 12 versus 13. Should also be a good football game. Kansas State, that's a good football game. If they're still in the polls, it'll be interesting going to Boulder to take on primetime Deion Sanders and the Buffs. So if the Buffs keep rolling, we'll see if they can get back into the top 25. They haven't been there since early last season. Kind of peek into week 8 a little bit as well. Week 8 coming up, October 18th, few weeks away. Alabama, Tennessee, that's a monster game there. Georgia, Texas, oh my God, that's 2 monster SEC games. Oh, if you got any activities to do on October 19th, you might want to take off. Look at these games. Michigan, Illinois should be good as well. Notre Dame, Georgia Tech should be a solid as well. A lot of good games that week. Continue to peek ahead. Week 9, you got, Missouri against Alabama. That's a big one as well. If Missouri's still undefeated at that point, that one's going to be huge. Illinois, they got a tough schedule. They got some tough guys coming up. We'll see if they can keep that ranking and stay where they are. They got Oregon on the road. You got Oklahoma and Ole Miss. That'll be a fun SEC matchup. Got the big rivalry, Florida State, Miami, even though the Seminoles stink this year. Washington, Indiana. See if Indiana keeps doing well. I would like to see them be a spoiler team. Week 10, Ohio State, Penn State, always a monster game. That'll probably be the whiteout game, Beaver Stadium. They'll probably put that on prime time. Penn State's always fired up in their fan for Ohio State, and they usually never beat them. Oregon, Michigan, that's another monster game going to the big house in Ann Arbor. Louisville and Clemson, another good game. Man, these games are big. I'm going to peek ahead another week or two. We'll go to week 11, November 4th. Of course, the big game here in Baton Rouge is going to be Alabama coming down to Tiger Stadium to take on LSU. That's a huge game. That's a holiday in this part of the country here in Baton Rouge. Georgia versus Ole Miss. That's a monster. Then you got some other good games like Miami, Georgia Tech, Oklahoma, Missouri. That's going to be a good one. Michigan, Indiana. Like I said, we'll see if Indiana can keep going or if there might be a 3-loss unranked team at this point. I hope they keep it going, though. I'd like to see them. Clemson got to watch out for Virginia Tech. BYU, Utah. That should be a great game. Battle of Utah rivalry there. Florida versus Texas. That shouldn't be much of a game. Florida State, Notre Dame. Would have been a great game before the season started. Looks like a blowout now. Week 12, Georgia, Tennessee is going to be massive. All the playoff implications on that. Oregon, Wisconsin, Penn State, Purdue. Let's see, what else is good? LSU, Florida, big rivalry. Of course, Florida's not very good. Clemson, Pittsburgh. Watch out for Pittsburgh. 4-0, I said it earlier. Eli Holstein. Watch out for those boys. And that's probably all I'm going to look at for right now as we peek ahead into the future. We'll just do one more week. Week 13, Alabama, Oklahoma. Indiana, Ohio State. Like I said, we'll see if Indiana's still undefeated. Maybe not undefeated, but at least playoff competition, maybe with 1 loss, or if they've peaked and now they have like 3-4 at the time. If they're still at that like 1 loss or undefeated, that would be a huge game. LSU, Vandy. Not a lot to see that week, to be honest with you, looking at it. Looking down. Now we'll go back to week 6. All right, so very good matchups coming up. Very good matchups. Definitely excited about some of these matchups to come. College football right now, we're hitting that big point in the season. It's week 6 right now. We're already almost at the halfway mark. So y'all keep following along for content in college football and the NFL. Talk baseball playoffs. We're going to talk everything. I'll talk hockey. I'll talk it all right here. So make sure you hit the subscribe button. Make sure you hit that like button on my videos and follow along as we talk sports. And as always, it's peace and sports. We'll see y'all later. Have a good one, folks.